All right, well, so how's everybody feeling? Up for a second day? I don't know about you, but I'm just completely on such a high from yesterday. It was so great having the opportunity to meet with so many of you. You know, I would say if you see me kind of walking around throughout the conference, please stop, say hello, tell me about your project and any challenges that you have and how our organization can help. I would say if you don't know me, I'm Jennifer Rigo Charles. I'm the Executive Director for Colorado Preservation, Inc. And just a quick show of hands, how many of you are familiar with CPI and the work that we do? Oh, excellent. How about the Endangered Places Program? Wonderful. Well, so many of you already know us, but hopefully for those of you who don't, by the end of this plenary session today, you'll have a deeper understanding and appreciation for both the organization and this important program. So, as always, we're incredibly grateful to our sponsors who, without their support, this really couldn't happen. So I'm going to go through the sponsor list, and if you could just hold your applause till the end. We have our premier sponsors, History Colorado State Historical Fund, HistoriCorps, Robert Musgraves and Joan Prusy, our program partners, CBS4 and Alpine Bank, our on-the-road sponsors, Empire Carpentry, Schubert Darden Architects. Our presenting sponsor this year is CU Denver College of Architecture and Planning. We have our partner sponsors, Anderson Hallis Architects, Epstein Ewan Architects, JVA Consulting Engineers, Metcalf Archaeological Consultants, and Factor Earth. Our supporting sponsors, the City of Boulder, the Colorado Historical Foundation, Colorado Scenic and Historic Byways, Deep Roots Craftsmen, Formworks Design Group, LLC, Heritage Window Restoration, Ratio Architects, Spectrum General Contractors, Summit Sealants, and Tax Credit Connection. We would also like to thank our conference exhibitors, so please join me in thanking them. So you've heard me say it before, and I'll say it again. We're Colorado Preservation, Inc. We're your statewide, nonprofit, historic preservation organization that advocates for saving places across the state. And I would say all of you, if not most of you, all of you, have a story, right? There was probably an individual or a place that drew you to the field. And for me, that was endangered places. That's what really got me interested in historic preservation. You know, despite having a family that took me to every museum and historical marker growing up, maybe some of you can relate, it wasn't the visits to Mount Vernon or Williamsburg or even the homes designed by famous architects that really drew me in. The places that really had the biggest impact on me were those of the nameless, the ones of the forgotten places, the places that were just kind of dotting the landscape of the Shenandoah Valley. And so these are just some images of the places that really connected me to historic preservation. And as you can see, so many of them would be considered endangered. The big difference is these endangered places, for the most part, didn't have a voice. They didn't have someone that was champion for their preservation. And that's certainly unlike our endangered places. One of the things that makes this program so unique is we work directly with communities and volunteers that are committed to saving these places. And, with being listed, obviously, not everybody really wants to have a place that's considered so threatened that it makes Colorado's Most Endangered Places program. But if you have one of those places, there's something special about it. It's got a high level of significance. There's a high level of importance that usually transcends the community that it's from, and it's something that's important to all of us in the state of Colorado. And so with this program, there's hope, there's resources, and there's a new level of awareness that really can take the project in places that it hasn't been before. So as we've talked about, not only is this 25 years of the conference, but we're celebrating 25 years of Colorado's Most Endangered Places. CPI has worked to protect the historic resources across the state that make up the fabric of our communities and represent who we are, where we come from, and where we're going. One of the strongest ways that our organization has had and continues to have a statewide impact is through one of our signatures programs, Colorado's Most Endangered Places. We established the program in 1997 as a way to highlight important resources that were in danger of being lost. Some of the first resources listed were those communities about to come under threat as the result of gambling. The historic communities of Black Hawk, Cripple Creek, and Central City. With change came education and opportunity. And of course, as many of you know, that's what led to the development of the State Historical Fund, which is directly involved in so many of the wonderful historic preservation projects that occur throughout the state, and certainly is a supporter of this program, which we're incredibly grateful for, not only the conference, but EPP as well. Today, EPP remains true to its grassroots beginning as we solicit nominations from the public and work directly with local organizations to create a plan for moving the selected resources forward. Our listed resources are not forgotten places, but community landmarks that speak to us through where they have been, what they represent, and what they can be in the future. Their redevelopment can instill change locally and provide examples to communities statewide. To be selected and listed as one of Colorado's most endangered places, the resource must be threatened, historically significant, demonstrate a strong level of community support, and a committed team dedicated to the future. And it's a process that certainly doesn't come easy. And many of you have probably served on the EPP committee where we essentially identify an advocate that's going to push through every resource that's been nominated, and eventually that decision is made by the committee as well as CPI staff and our board. Our endangered places are truly woven throughout Colorado. 2022 marks the 25th anniversary of the program, and unfortunately there are endangered places in every region of the state, with listed resources in 49 of the state's 64 counties. Through EPP, we hope to capture the story of Colorado's development, with many of our listed places telling individual stories of different periods, perspectives, and people. From schoolhouses to railroad buildings, from places of worship to places of industry, agriculture, and entertainment. From places of native beginnings to places of early homesteads, they have all found a home under the Endangered Places program. And once you're listed in part of the EPP family, we want you to be saved, but you never leave us. From those that are lost, luckily it's only a few, we try to take those lessons learned and bring those out to other communities. And everyone else kind of goes through this progress from initial listing of alert all the way, hopefully, to save. So without further ado, it's my great pleasure to introduce the man that runs this entire program, Kim Grant. He's the Director of Endangered Places. He certainly knows these communities well and gets out and about and understands and appreciates saving places.
Thank you, Jennifer. Good morning and welcome to the official announcement and kickoff of the 25th anniversary of Colorado's Most Endangered Places. It's no accident that this anniversary coincides with the 25th anniversary of the Saving Places conferences. So, both of these signature CPI programs have their roots in Colorado's early preservation movement, and Jennifer and I would like to acknowledge our predecessors that have helped us get to this milestone. Most importantly, though, we want to recognize you. So thank you. This is your birthday celebration, too. The 25th anniversary of the Endangered Places program provides us with an opportunity to take stock and reflect on the past quarter century and ask ourselves, what have we accomplished together on this journey? In raw numbers, we've nominated nearly 650 sites and listed 130 of them. Of these 130 sites, 54 are now considered saved, with 49 in active progress and 20 still on alert status. Only 7 have been lost in the 25 years of the program. But behind all these numbers, what are we really talking about here? We're talking about saving Main Street and other historic commercial buildings, houses, barns, bridges, ditches, flumes, schools, orchards, cultural landscapes, farms and ranches, adobe potato barns, wickiups, churches and synagogues, opera houses, national monuments, civic places and spaces, depots, trolleys, power plants, homesteads, elevators, hotels and mills, theaters, industrial buildings, fire stations, neon signs, slave quarters, dredges, cemeteries and roadside attractions, and yes, even Colorado's Capitol Dome. So that's what we've accomplished together. But the next question becomes, what have we learned over the past 25 years? Well, we've learned that preservation is certainly about saving significant buildings, landscapes, and places. That's obvious. But we've learned that preservation is also about environmental conservation and the protection of natural resources and the natural alliances that spring from that. We've learned that preservation is about heritage tourism and bringing public history alive. We've learned that preservation is about Main Street and downtown revitalization. We've learned that preservation creates jobs, has a significant economic impact, and helps sustain skilled building trades and craft traditions. We've learned that preservation is about retaining community, ethnic, and tribal identities. We've learned that preservation is about saving diverse cultural legacies, stories, and history. We've also learned that preservation is about placemaking, and as our CPI tagline says, building a future with historic places. So we've learned that preservation is also about the process of managing change in a more thoughtful, sustainable way. We've learned that preservation is about making the difficult managing the difficult balance between revitalization and gentrification. And we've learned that preservation is about partnerships, perseverance, and perspectives. And harnessing those perspectives is, of course, what this conference is all about. And finally, we've learned that we can't do it without you. It's because of you and the fact that grassroots citizens asked for such a program as Colorado's Most Endangered Places that we are here where we are today. So thank you all. So here's to another 25 years of preservation successes and saving Colorado's most threatened and endangered places. This passage of time has given us the opportunity to reflect upon this legacy and to pause and recalibrate a bit. In order to focus on urgent issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and toward that end, we've chosen in 2022 to focus on 5 key sites, 3 of which are reflective of Black, Indigenous, and people of color heritage, while one is related to the story of ethnic immigration to this country, and the other is a rural community that is struggling with difficult economic circumstances. I'm not going to go into the details of these 5 priority sites, as well as the 2 newly declared SAVE sites for 2022, which are the Denver Tramway Streetcar number .04 and the Riling Gold Dredge near Breckenridge. But rather, I'm going to let the talented work of CBS4 producer Kevin Strong and narrator Dave Aguilera take you on a journey to get to the stories behind these places and of the people working to save them. Dave Aguilera is a lifelong Coloradan and was born and raised in Pueblo. He's covered news and weather in a long career in journalism and is one of the most engaging and recognizable personalities on television. He's also used to getting up early to report on the weather, and I can see he's chomping at the bit, wide awake and raring to go. So please join me in welcoming Dave Aguilera.
Good morning, everybody. I had to bring my coffee up with me as well. Usually we do a luncheon, so I'm not used to getting up this early during the week. So we got a great crowd here. Usually it's a lunch and we fill the room, and I think we filled the room this morning. Just want to thank you all for coming out, and congratulations, Kim and Julie, for the 25th anniversary of saving historic places in Colorado. Let's give them another big round of applause for that. 25 years? Woo, man. Want to get rolling here. First, I just want to see who is in the crowd today. How many people do we have from right here in Denver visiting this morning? Good, good, good. Quite a few, good. You didn't have to drive too far to get down here. How many of you from out of town? Okay, quite a few. Beautiful, beautiful. Anybody from Pueblo out here? Sometimes we have some Puebloans. No Puebloans this year. Okay, no Puebloans this year. Reason I asked that is CPI picked a great week to have this conference here. If it was last week, remember what happened last Tuesday? We had that big, huge snowstorm around here, and everybody was shoveling. I was down in Pueblo. My mother had hip surgery down there, so I was in Pueblo and not up here. So I only had to shovel 5 inches of snow opposed to the 10 inches of snow, which actually fell at my house. So I was in great shape here. So picked a great week. Weather-wise, I had to start with the weather, of course, because I'm a meteorologist at Channel 4. So let's get rolling here. This year, as Kim alluded to, that we're going to revisit 5 of the sites that have been named to endangered places on the list in years past, and we're going to bring you updates on the progress of some of those, a little insight on some of the challenges that they face and the hardships that they have to go through to get things done. Seldom, as many of you know, when you're working on historic preservation, does it happen fast. It takes months and years and sometimes decades to get things going. So everybody that works on these sites just has to stay motivated, and that's one of the things that we're going to talk about today. Also going to highlight 2 additional sites that have been named to the Save the List this year, and that's kind of proof that the hard work and the perseverance really pays off in the end. Before we get going here, CBS4 has been proud to partner with CPI in telling the stories of endangered places since 2002. And producer Kevin Strong, along with a lot of our photographers, have traveled to every corner of the state trying to tell these stories around here. And Kevin is with us. I want to tell you about Kevin. Kevin's one of our great editors at Channel 4, and editors, the person who puts all the pictures to the words and makes everything flow. But he puts in countless hours on these pieces, not only so they look good, but so they invoke some heartfelt feeling and get people to step forward and help out. So I just want Kevin to stand up, and can we acknowledge Kevin? He is the producer of all of the pieces we put together. And also, he brought his beautiful daughter and his handsome son coming out here. So thank you two for showing up today. I appreciate that. My kids would never get up at 7 o'clock in the morning and come to a breakfast that I'm at. So can we give it up for his kiddos coming out today? And I've watched them grow since they were little, and they're great 2 kids. So congratulations, Kevin, that you got them up early. Hey, before we get going too, whenever I MC something, I always like to take a selfie and put it on my Facebook page so the boss knows that I'm actually doing something and not just eating breakfast and having coffee here. Do you guys mind being in my selfie? Okay, let's do it right. We'll do it right down the middle, then we'll get you guys over there here. Okay, can everybody wave, please? Oh, thank you. All right. Can everybody wave for me, please? Yes. Oh, man, you guys look good. Let me get you guys over here. All right. Just got to have some proof, to show that I'm actually doing something. All right. Okay, let's get rolling here now. The site updates we're showcasing this year will be aired in the spring, too. It's a half-hour special that Kevin puts together called Colorado's Most Endangered Places on CBS4. It'll be on television and on our streaming service, CBS News Colorado, as well. How many of you, we aired last year's a little extra this year, like I think it was over New Year? Was it New Year's? It was New Year's Eve, I think, right? And New Year's Day. Did any of you see last year's? We re-aired it New Year's Day and over the holidays and stuff. So it's not just once. We try to keep it going wherever we can. So we're going to start this morning in southwestern Colorado. If there's one thing that preservationists need in abundance working on any project, it's faith. faith in themselves, faith in what they're doing, faith in their efforts, faith in their people. They keep that faith going, and it will bear fruit eventually. And if there's ever a building that exemplifies the importance of faith, it's a church. The Iglesia de San Antonio was listed in 2019. Since then, those looking to save the church have drawn on its faith as they begin the restoration process to discover it's a lot bigger job than they originally thought.
For Mom and Dad.
Tony Semler rings the church bell at the Iglesia de San Antonio in Tiffany, Colorado.
Mom and Dad were also caretakers for many years.
Her parents taught her to cherish the church and community it serves.
Mom made us understand the honor in doing that kind of job, in giving your best to God.
The bell here first called the faithful to worship in 1928. The Catholic Church served as the cornerstone of life for many in southwestern Colorado.
Hispanic folks came into the area, coming up into Colorado through the San Luis Valley, and they spread west as miners, as farmers, as ranchers.
As they settled, they built small churches to serve their new communities. Many of those communities have faded from the landscape.
And so to have a church that's still active in an old building that's adobe is pretty exciting.
The church bell rings now, not as a call to worship, but a call to action. The Iglesia de San Antonio needs help.
It's not under-engineered per se, it's what was done, and they weren't really accounting for the 100-year life, I think.
Age and deterioration of this unique church led it to being listed on the Endangered Places list in 2019. That spurred some initial grant money to fund an architectural study.
Foundation is not totally solid, it's not reinforced with steel, so it's able to move around a little. And then also the vaulted ceiling has been bowing the walls out.
The windows are in really bad condition. They have a contact paper on there, and it was kind of a poor man's version of stained glass.
Now it's up to the architects and engineers to chart a path forward.
Part of the challenge is restoring those windows without taking that contact paper off.
It's this balance of finding the sweet spot between holding the structure together and not damaging what's already there. And that's really what makes historic structural engineering quite a challenge.
It's a challenge that's often compounded by the unexpected.
When we took up a portion of the floor, we found a lot of termite damage, and the floor framing's in contact with the ground, and so there's a lot of rot. When you find something like that, the dollar amount for the restoration immediately increases.
Those added expenses may slow the project, but those involved know how to keep things manageable.
We're going to have more phases now, and we can make it so that each phase will be grouped so that you can do the required cash match.
Patience is key, because while progress will be slow, it is still progress.
Once this building is restored, that more people will see it and will learn about the importance of these buildings within the community.
It was a privileged feeling.
Those who grew up in this church know their faith and lessons learned within these walls will carry them forward.
While we were here cleaning, she'd let us go up and play the organ a little bit, and then she'd say, bueno, suficiente, get back to work.
And they know there's still a lot of work to do.
So that shows there's a lot of work now. If faith is one component of preservation, the other one is commitment. That has to be next in line. Seldom does anything happen quickly when you're involving historic preservation. The Union Pacific Railroad's pump house in Kit Carson was listed in 2005, and very little productive work had been done to secure the building since that listing. That has not stopped those that are working to save it from thinking about doing what they need to do. They're in it for the long haul. They're going to get this thing done. Despite the challenges from the building's deteriorating condition and changing local population, which seems less in touch with the town's history, they're not going to let up. They're hoping a revived interest in the steam locomotives along old railroad towns in the Eastern Plains means full steam ahead for their restoration efforts.
When steam engines ruled the rails, the towns which grew up around the tracks provided critical resources to keep the trains running. Chief among them, the water to make the steam.
Well, we're in Kit Carson, Colorado. At one time, it was a fueling and watering stations for the steam engines.
At Kit Carson, the water tank was filled by a pump in this small stone pump house.
This is the only pump house along the Kansas Pacific line. Probably looking at maybe 120, 125 years that this building's been here.
Jack Johnson is a retired civil engineer who moved to Kit Carson 4 years ago.
How these corners are finished.
He found himself drawn to the building's robust stonework.
That block there is where the pump engine set. And the pulleys run through that door to the pump jack.
The machinery is gone, like the steam locomotives it served. The pump house, built to last, outlasted its usefulness.
Part of eastern Colorado.
Victor Gibbs serves on the board of the Kit Carson Historical Society, which owns the building.
We tried to keep it clean, but
Time is working against them. Mortar is deteriorating. The roof is almost gone.
I don't know what you do with it other than build some type of structure inside to help support it.
The site was added to the Endangered Places list in 2005. Since then, the challenges facing the site have only increased. First, there's the railroad, which owns the land the pump house sits on.
We just can't get the funding because the railroad didn't want us to do anything here.
Then there's the town's remote location.
The last probably 10 years, we've seen fewer people come through.
Fewer people means less money. That's compounded by a changing population.
Of course, our population's dwindling too, and a lot of the donors have left. They're probably upstairs. And then a lot of people move in that's not from here, and they don't have any care about this. And so it's a tough road.
But interest in steam trains has certainly not gone away. When the Union Pacific's big boy locomotive came through Kit Carson,
I've never seen so many people in my life in this community. I mean, it was tough to keep them off the tracks.
Gibbs and Johnson hope they can use that enthusiasm to their advantage and maybe convince the railroad that the building can play part in preserving steam railroading heritage in Colorado.
Since it's the only structure like this in Colorado, and since the steam, the big boy and other challengers and them come through here.
That it lasted as long as it did without anybody doing anything. That gives high marks to the Union Pacific Engineering Department.
Like the stones that make up the walls, those that want to save the building stand resilient in their goal.
If you want to do it, you better put your mind up that it needs to be done and do what is necessary to go ahead. Other than that, just talking about it ain't gonna fix it.
All right. And a little update on the pump house. The folks in Kit Carson recently met with a group of engineering students from DU to do an engineering analysis of the building to find out the best way to move forward in re-engineering the building. So that's good news there. Sometimes people get involved in historic preservation by accident. They aren't necessarily looking to save a historic site, but find themselves captivated by the building's unique character, much like in that story where he saw the stone and the architecture. Man, what could we do to save this building? Such is the case with Strange's Grocery in Grand Junction. It made the Endangered Places list in 2001, but little has happened since that listing. Then, just this past year, the building caught the attention of a local developer who saw a really cool building and more importantly, saw a lot of potential in that building. The history lesson learned here, that he learned, I should say, after signing the papers was just the icing on the cake for him.
The building hasn't really settled. I mean,
Kevin Tinsley checks out the Grand Junction building he recently acquired.
it was stone among a bunch of frame buildings and cinder block buildings. It was really, it's unique.
The 3 stone arches in the front caught Tinsley's attention.
This and its view from the street is what makes this building stand out. I didn't even know it was a historic place when I bought it.
The building offers passersby a few clues to its storied past. A carved stone date, rusty awning, fading paint. But even the historic plaque placed on the front understates its significance to the story of Grand Junction and its residents.
Strange's grocery store was built in 1909, a significant part of the Little Italy community.
Vida Jaber is the curator of history and architecture for the museums of Western Colorado. She says Grand Junction's Little Italy thrived from the turn of the century.
You couldn't walk down Pitkin Avenue without smelling all the breads and the bakeries.
Little Italy provided the Italian immigrant community a place to feel safe.
They were free, they were able to own their land, send their kids to school.
Strange's Grocery was one of 4 grocers serving the neighborhood and greater community.
You had the railroad workers, the people coming off and on the trains. They were at the cross point of the most populated part of town.
Grand Junction's train depot stands just a block away.
All aboard, folks, here we go.
Those trains still run through Grand Junction, and civic leaders have plans on redeveloping the neighborhoods surrounding the depot.
It's a lot of faith.
Tinsley sees Strange's Grocery playing a role in that new economy redevelopment.
We call them laptop workers, but they're going to get tired of being laptop workers because there's a social part of showing up to work every day and interacting with your coworkers. They're a bit narrow by today's standards.
He's looking to adapt Strange's Grocery to serve that need for space.
I didn't buy this because for today. I figure a year, maybe 2, before this will actually return and I'll be able to get a full-time tenant and all in here. The secondary egress for fire.
He says restoring the building to its former glory will be the first priority.
When you say restoration, you don't really think of creating something new. You think of putting it back. This will be taken down and replaced with. It might be creative in the sense of trying to figure out how to do that.
If he's successful, Strange's Grocery Store will live on to give a new generation of Grand Junction residents a sense of pride and optimism of those who came before.
We forget the hardships that these people came in and struggled with when settling in, but they were able to adapt, and I think it's just a part of the Grand Junction history.
I'd like to take it back to 1909.
Tinsley plans on drawing on that optimism to see his project through.
Taking something that was probably neglected or maybe not fully utilized and making it into something useful.
All righty. Well, this brings us to our first save of the 25th anniversary. Like Strange's Grocery, it didn't start as a mission specifically to save an important part of history. Denver Tramway's trolley car .04 served Denver area commuters for 40 years before it was sold off to serve as a hunting lodge in Rawlingsville. The Forney Museum later acquired the car, but when they moved from downtown, it was rendered surplus and put up for sale. And the folks who bought it didn't want to see it cut up for scrap, so they sought out to learn the rest of the story.
When you bought it, it's like the dog chased the car. Oh God, now I got the car, what am I going to do with it?
Wally and Susie Wirt purchased Denver Tramway car .04 in 1999. They knew it was historic, but they didn't realize its true significance.
And when we bought it, we had no idea that this was the last car to ever run in Denver.
The Denver Tramway operated a network of trolley lines throughout the metro Denver area.
A lot of the roads in the streetcar area weren't even paved, so the streetcar made a handy way to get to Lakeside Park to go downtown.
That came to a halt on July 3rd, 1950. Denver Tramway Car .04 had the honor of making the last official run.
It made it a lot more valuable to try to save. So we bought it and we were going to donate it to Denver Rail Heritage, but their business model changed and it wound up in a storage yard in Arvada.
The Wirtz eventually approached the city of Arvada to see how the streetcar might fit in with Arvada's historic preservation efforts.
It has its own unique identity apart from just being part of the Denver metro area. And Old Town is really a showcase of a lot of that history.
The city agreed and began the process of seeing what it might take.
It began with a $13,000 grant to do a historic structure assessment.
In 2015, the fledgling effort to save Streetcar .04 landed it on the Endangered Places list.
Lent a lot of credence to why we needed to invest the resources into this project.
Through that effort, the city partnered with the Friends of the .04 Preservation Group to raise the funds needed to restore the car, and not a moment too soon.
I think another few years and it would have been pretty much unrestorable.
Michael Pinnell and Kevin Murray restored the streetcar.
It was a lot worse than we imagined, but that's the way these things go very often. And the actual main beams just came out in big chunks, you know, between rotted sections. You could just pry them out. And
one challenge: figuring out how craftsmen built the car in the first place.
There was quite a few things that I think either of us had never really coped with or dealt with before, but it was so it was a good learning curve.
I mean, in the old days, they had, guys did this all day long, but when you're in the restoration mode, not everybody knows how to stretch the canvas roof to make it look like it should.
The pair restored the car to its 1950s appearance.
Its significance was the day it was pulled into the barn for the last time.
It still has some of the dents and dings in it that, that it had when it finished, which is what Arvada wanted.
22 months later, they were ready to call Streetcar .04 complete.
The root box down at the front, that was donated from a private collection in Washington.
Those involved credit a lot of luck to making the restoration as authentic as it is.
People who said, well, I don't have any money, but I've got this part. You want it? Well, yeah.
Parts like seats.
And a friend of mine got in touch to say that he had 34 Denver trolley seats in his barn that had been in storage. That was a really amazing find that you'll never find again.
The plan is to return the car to Arvada.
As the Gold Line came in and Old Town became a major commuter rail hub, that we preserve this former commuter rail artifact of history and display it somewhere relevant in the Old Town area.
So this car is coming home, and it means a great deal to have it come home, back to where it belongs, part of our history.
And be sure to mark your calendar. Arvada city officials are hoping to have a ribbon-cutting ceremony for the new park displaying trolley .04 in June of this year. So in a few months, they'll put it out for everybody to see. It's hard to watch the news these days without hearing a debate on history, what should be taught, what should not be taught. In historic preservation, it's common to come across sites which are focal points that once were dark chapters in history and debate the merits of actually saving them. Here in Colorado, one of those darker chapters involves the government's treatment of Native Americans. In the 1900s, the U.S. government set up boarding schools on tribe reservations. The intent was that these schools were to assimilate the Native Americans into the European way of life. And it didn't work very well. Over time, the schools served to bring the tribes closer together and closer to their ancestors. So it kind of did the opposite thing. 3 buildings from the Southern Ute Boarding School still stand in the Southern Ute Reservation in Ignacio. The school was listed on the list in 2020, and since that listing, preservationists have wasted no time documenting the buildings and working to preserve all the historical artifacts that are inside. So regardless of the outcome of the debate among the larger tribal community, their history will be documented and preserved in one form or another.
Our culture to us is important because it that identifies us who we are.
That identity is proudly displayed inside this school dining hall.
We call this in our language, kakan, place where you eat.
Alden Naranjo served and ate many meals here.
A lot of the Indian kids that went here from different tribes, the Navajo, Ute, Apaches.
The dining hall is part of the Ute boarding school built by the U.S. government in 1901 in an effort to force tribes to conform to mainstream society.
In the earlier years, they were forbidden to go home. They were, all their hair was cut. They were given kind of like uniforms. They were also forbidden to speak their language. That was, in a way, saying, we're taking your identity away from you. You're going to be like me. I'm going to teach you how to be like me.
The tribe's fierce loyalty to culture proved to be too much for the government's motives, and cultural restrictions began to relax.
That practice changed in the late 40s, where the students were allowed to speak their language and also attend their cultural ceremonies.
Over time, the school built to strip the Native Americans of their identity became an incubator for preserving it.
The school was built to take away the Indian out of the children. Now, the historical parts of the buildings that's left, it gives us a story.
Today, only 3 of the original buildings still remain on the campus: the dining hall, girls' dormitory, and the central school and gymnasium. They were placed on the Endangered Places list in 2020 as tribal leaders began discussing what to do with the aging vacant buildings.
At this point, there are no plans for restoration or renovation.
Garrett Briggs is working to preserve the buildings. He surveyed tribal members to gauge their interest in seeing them saved.
The Indian boarding school period did not only impact the decision makers, it affected our entire community. So that tribal membership feedback is needed for tribal council, our leadership, to make those decisions.
Meanwhile, the tribal council ordered a thorough study of the site to assess its physical condition and begin asbestos mitigation. They also documented the Depression-era murals which adorn the cafeteria and gymnasium.
It's interesting because of the context and when it was painted, because it really starts showing the shift of the Indian boarding school era with respect to forcefully assimilate through the removal of cultural traditions of the students into kind of embracing it.
The tribe also requested detailed 3D laser scans of the buildings inside and out.
Even if those buildings are taken down, we have the opportunity to use that information to create a virtual walkthrough or a tour of those buildings.
Briggs hopes it does not come to that, but there are many factors in play.
After taking everything into consideration with respect to money, the current condition of the structural integrity of the building, and future use of the area, we don't know what buildings we'll be able to protect, but we know that we will work as hard as we can to protect some of that history as much as we possibly can.
Protecting their history and their identity.
I was born in a native Ute, and I'm gonna die a native Ute. So, so you can't take that from me. That's mine.
And just to give you a heads up, Garrett Briggs and Cassandra Atencio will be presenting a session on their preservation efforts later today here at the meeting. Now, our last site that we're revisiting this year also has ties to darker times in Colorado. This site stands as a monument to achievement and success over racial prejudice. The town of Deerfield, Colorado was listed on the Endangered Places list in 1999, and in its heyday, it was a nationally recognized farming community built by and for African Americans. Little is left today but the continuing efforts of 2 UNC professors to tell the story of the people who called Deerfield home has once again put the town in the national spotlight.
This chain link fence protects the remains of the town of Deerfield, Colorado.
This was the gas station with gas pumps out in the front.
University of Northern Colorado professor George June has spent the past 3 decades working to save what has survived from this once thriving agricultural town.
We have O.T. Jackson's name in the wood, so we know that this is original.
O.T. Jackson was an African-American promoter who wanted fellow African-Americans to have a piece of the American dream.
Owning a home is more than just having your own space. It's also something that you can give to your children, your grandchildren.
He founded the town of Deerfield in 1910 to give African Americans a place to thrive in the American West in a time when they were still viewed by many as second-class citizens.
Denver was a segregated city, so black people could only live in certain areas such as 5 Points.
Deerfield quickly prospered.
Almost anybody who was African American knew about Deerfield. They had their own farms, they had their schools, their churches. It was pretty much a self-sustaining community.
The town enjoyed unwavering success for nearly 20 years, until an unforeseen cycle in the weather would spell its demise.
The Dust Bowl comes in and takes out everything. About a quarter of the farms in the United States, a quarter of them went under. The people at Deerfield did not do anything wrong. It's just that the knowledge wasn't there at that time about these rain cycles.
The settlers scattered with the winds. By 1950, little remained.
It was pretty well forgotten about.
The story of Deerfield would have faded with the buildings were it not for June and fellow UNC professor Robert Brunswick.
Not only fascinated by the history, but also fascinated by the opportunity as an archaeologist to bring my students out here.
The two professors began documenting the site with the help of the Black American West Museum, which now owns the site. The renewed attention led it to being listed on Colorado Preservation's Most Endangered list in 1999.
The more people find out about Deerfield, what we're finding is that there are people who are interested.
Linoleum has got to go.
In 2012, they started the Deerfield Dream Project.
We've been working to get grants. We've been working to preserve the buildings as much as we can.
There are only 3 buildings still on the property: O.T. Jackson's house, the gas station, and the lunch counter, though time has taken its toll on it.
When we started work at Deerfield, the lunchroom behind me was still standing, but age and weather wait for no one.
Their efforts are beginning to bear fruit. The site recently received a $500,000 grant from the National Park Service.
So these 2 standing buildings, the filling station and the Jackson House, are going to be stabilized. The exteriors and the roofs and the sidewalls are going to be repaired and painted.
It's a healthy boost, but there's always more to be done.
It's more of a process of persistence than anything else. You take small steps and you take big steps, and whatever fits in.
This is the second house.
For June, the emerging fruits of their decades-long pursuit fill him with hope.
I didn't think anything was going to come of it. And now Deerfield is starting to have a second life.
And an update on that story as well. Congressman Ken Buck and Jonah Goose have introduced legislation to study the feasibility of bringing Deerfield under the umbrella of the National Park Service. This would clear the way for additional funding for restoration and interpretation as well. Now, finally, we're going to look at our second saved site for 2022. And continuing a theme, it's not without ties to a controversial period of Colorado history. The Riling Dredge in Breckenridge made the Endangered Places list in 2015. The town's commitment to telling its history, warts and all, has helped to keep this relic from mining's golden era from collapsing into the pond that it dug.
The dredge is the most iconic symbol that represents the mining era in Breckenridge.
Long before Breckenridge mined tourist dollars, they mined gold.
This is Breckenridge, Colorado, but they're moving it away to get the gold that's underneath.
Breckenridge was founded in 1859, and that time mining was the center of Colorado's economy.
Each bucket of dirt is worth 15 cents.
In Breckenridge, that mining came in the form of dredges, large barges which would float in the streams, digging up the ground beneath them for whatever riches were deposited. In their wake, they left large piles of rock.
For the better part of the last century, the landscape of Breckenridge was defined by the destruction that these dredges did.
Over the years, Breckenridge has reclaimed the land from many of these valleys, except French Gulch.
But this valley in particular, you can see the damage on the environment that the dredges wrought.
And see the remains of one of the dredges, the Riling Gold Dredge.
When the dredge was operating, there was walls, a roof. None of this would have been visible. It would have all been interior structure.
There were some who saw no value in preserving a monument to environmental destruction.
They saw it as something that was better off just disintegrating into the earth.
Preservationists and civic leaders saw a way to use it to teach about both history and the environment.
The industry at the time was all mining all the time. You know, environment was not even on their radar. So we have to be preserving these sites that inform us about why we care about the environment now. To just let that part of our history go is a real disservice to who we are as a people today.
The Riling Gold Dredge made the list of Colorado's most endangered places in 2015.
Listing on the Endangered Places program really elevated this project with the local community, with some of our local leaders.
The following year, the city acquired the dredge and surrounding property from the mining company which had owned it. It began a series of architectural and environmental studies to determine where to go from there.
We determined from the beginning that we were not trying to recreate a working dredge.
Let's keep what's there. Let's let people see the structure of the dredge.
Restoring the dredge presented many logistical challenges.
We set up a siphon and were able to bring the level of the pond down 3 feet. And that enabled the restoration team to comfortably and safely work on the dredge hull.
Contractors used helicopters to fly materials in and out, so not to disturb the surrounding landscape.
So unique in nature, and there's really nothing to compare it to. I leaned on so many experts and people in the field to help us think through things a little differently, and just to get a great team involved and just keep pressing.
Keep pressing. It sounds easy. Those involved say the key is to keep the passion alive.
Keep bringing partners in, keep building consensus, build awareness of the importance of projects to the history of your community.
We're all in this field because we love historic preservation, but to just keep at it. That's really what worked in the long run, is we weren't willing to let this one go.
All right, I'd like to ask everyone who is involved in working to save all of the sites listed this year to please stand up and be recognized this morning. And the quote of the day, I think, is somebody asked if we needed a part, and you said, "Yeah, bring us a part." Right? That was awesome. I love it. Thank you all for joining us this morning. We really appreciate it. We want to take a moment to credit everyone who provided historical and other photos and video for these stories. And on behalf of Kevin Strong and CBS4, I want to thank CPI for their ongoing preservation work. And also, I want to thank each of you for supporting preserving historic sites in Colorado. None of this would happen without your faith, perseverance, and commitment to saving the sites that you hold dear to your hearts. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for showing up this morning. I will see you on Channel 4. I'm going to turn it over to Blair Miller now. You all have a good day. Good morning. By the way, sunny, breezy, and 50 degrees today in Denver. Bye-bye.